So this whole food web, couple of other things you want to think about, benefits that we're going to get. This is the plant available nutrients. Bacteria and fungi form that massive wall. And they make enzymes to pull the nutrients into their bodies from the plant not available forms into an organic form inside the bacteria and fungi. The predators eat the bacteria and fungi and they release nutrients in a plant available form. That's how Mother Nature has been cycling nutrients, making them available to the plants for the last 3.5 billion years. Has Mother Nature had a little time to get this right? And we've only had 100 years, and man, have we screwed it up. So, when we look at the things a healthy food web will do, we've talked about the disease suppression, so you should have a pretty good idea why that works. We've talked about who retains nutrients. Those are your bacteria and fungi. If they're sucking up those nutrients, keeping them in their bodies, then we don't have leaching out of our soil. We don't have runoff. You don't have erosion loss. If we've got the predators, then we're going to make those nutrients available to the plants at the rate the plant requires, because the plant is in control of how rapidly the bacteria and fungi are growing. And so what's the food resource for our predators? Releasing those nutrients, and we don't have to be putting out fertilizers of any kind because your soil already has those nutrients. If we've got toxins in our soils, we got to make sure we have the right organisms that will get rid of those toxic material. And we'll talk about anaerobic conditions and what's so wrong about anaerobic conditions. You need to understand that, though, because there's a lot of confusion out there in the world about that particular one. We want to make sure that we select against the growth of your weeds. Weeds require strictly bacterial-dominated soils, strictly protozoa as the nutrient cyclers. If you have no fungi, none of the fungal feeding organisms in your soil, then you're going to be growing weeds. Oh, joy. Not the plant that you want to be growing. So we need to understand how nature has built up productivity in soil. What is it that nature has been doing over the last 3.5 billion years? Well, plants have been on this planet for 1 billion years. So over the last 1 billion years, how has Mother Nature used these interactions to build productivity in these different ecosystems? And we'll go over that too. And probably one of the most important things that we need to be thinking of, understanding, getting this run straight in our soils, is how do you build soil structure? Who is it that builds structure for you in your soil? When you just have your sand, silts, and clays equally dispersed, when you've got a few rocks, a few pebbles, whatever in your soil, you have to have the bacteria making glues to start gluing together the clays, the sands, the silts, any organic matter that might be in there, and the bacteria start to glue that together. Because think about this bacterium. If it's free in the soil solution, if we've just got bacteria here in our soil, the next time it rains and the water starts moving through that medium, where are your bacteria going to go? Where are your fungi going? They're going to be washed right out of the soil unless they glue themselves or bind themselves with the hyphae and prevent themselves from washing out. So all your bacteria are glued to your root systems. They're glued to the surface of your sands, your silts, your clays, your rocks, your pebbles. So here we have our surface of a sand. My bacterium is going to glue itself, nice big glue layer. As it's sitting there going, well, I'm hoping some food wanders by here pretty quick. When that piece of organic matter comes on by, that bacterium glues the organic matter right in there. So now we've got a little aggregate starting to form because of the glues that the bacteria make. And now the bacteria, it's got food, so now that bacterium is going to reproduce. Now we have 2 bacteria where we used to have 1. And 20 minutes later, we're going to have 4 bacteria. 20 minutes later, we got 16. And 20 minutes later, we have 84. And 20 minutes later, we got, 1,060, whatever it is. So look at how fast these bacteria are growing. We've got a nice colony completely held in that area with the glues they make. And they're going to pull in a sand. and start to build a larger aggregate structure. And I'll show you some of these aggregates in just a few minutes. But if we just had bacteria forming these micro aggregates, it's not going to be a big enough space to let our roots grow through, or to let a lot of our bigger critters to grow through that or move through that soil. It might not be enough space to allow a drop of water. We can't break the surface tension on that drop of water so it will infiltrate into your soil if we just have bacterial aggregates. So what else do we have to have? Well, we better have those fungi, because their threads, their strands, are going to pull all those little micro aggregates together into macro aggregates that you can see with your eyeballs. Remember the handful of compost that Patrick showed in the little film that he had on the living web? Did you see the structure in that? Yeah. That was built by the bacteria and fungi performing their jobs. That's what you must be seeing in your compost. If you're not seeing structure like that, you're not getting the organisms growing, and it's not compost. So be looking for some of these visual signs that tell you we've got both sets of organisms building structure. And then, of course, the larger critters are going to build the larger pore spaces in your soil. So, building soil structure. How fast can we build an inch of soil? I can do it in about an hour. How about you? The USDA says it takes 100 years to build an inch of soil. And I see that poster that they've got up on the wall, and I just laugh. It's ridiculous. Okay, if you have no life, well, even in 100 years, you're not going to build an inch of soil if you have no life. So where did the USDA come up with this idea that it takes 100 years to build an inch of soil? Well, remember what kind of systems they're working in? Agriculture, dead ones. Okay, if all you got are a bunch of bacteria, how long is it going to take you to build an inch of soil? Probably way longer than 100 years.
They're going by breaking down the rock.
Yep. And so when, she's saying that, they may be going down by how do you break down the rock? Well, what's the mechanism where most of your parent material is going to be converted into sand, silt, and clay particles? What is it that does that breakdown? Nope, sorry. It's not weathering. It's not erosion. It's bacteria and fungi. Who's got the enzymes, guys? Enzymes. So when we're looking at breakdown of the rocks, when people talk about weathering, well, go take a look at the surface of the rocks. What's actually all over the surface of that rock? Fungi. Lichens, being a mix of fungi and algae. So who is it that actually breaks down your bedrock into the sand, silt, and clay fractions? It's the organisms. There's a whole group over at the University of Helsinki in Finland that's what they've been doing for the last 5 years, showing very clearly that freeze, thaw, wet, dry, those are really slow processes. It's life that does this work. So building our structure, well, as we build structure, then we can hold more water in the soil. And so we're going to reduce water use. In Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, in Dubai, in South Africa, in Manchuria, in different parts of the desert parts of the world, we've been building soil structure, and we reduce water use by 70%. If we can reduce water use by 70% in places where they are hurting for water, you can grow more crops. So we increase crop yield by a factor of double, triple, quadruple, just on the fact that we're keeping water in the system. Every drop of dew that falls in arid climates and semi-arid climates must move into the soil and be held in the soil so your roots can get down to it, so that they can get to that water even when you have not had rain for 5 or 6 months. There are places in Australia where we haven't had rainfall in about 5 years. But dewfall happens every morning and every night. And that's more than enough water to grow grapes, to grow cantaloupe, to grow pretty much any crop you want. So we have to rebuild that structure. We increase the water holding capacity. We increase rooting depth. It doesn't do your plants much good if the root systems of your plants are only going down this far into your soil. And there is no plant other than weeds that only puts its root system down this far. How do we make sure that we get our roots going as deep as they should be going? When we're looking at a tomato, how far down should the root system of a tomato be going in the first month? About 3 to 4 feet. Are your roots going down that far? And if they're not, there's something wrong with your soil. There's something wrong with the life in your soil. Please fix it. So your tomatoes don't need to be watered. Think about your lawn. Go home and look at how far down the root systems of your lawn grasses are going. If they're only going down this far, these are sick, unhealthy, unhappy plants. How far down should the roots of poa, ryegrass, how far down should they be going in the first couple of weeks? 6 to 8 inches. By the time you're at the end of that first growing season, they should be down 10 to 15 feet. And then you don't have to water your lawn. So who's been convincing us that we should be out there putting on these toxic chemicals and killing the biology in the soil so that you're going to have to constantly put water on your lawn? Who makes money? You? Or? Yeah. So stop being hoodwinked. You have to understand this life, this biology in your soil. We get the roots to go deeper so you don't have to irrigate. You don't have to pay for that water. Maybe in this part of the world you don't have, maybe that's not a major cost. But out where I live, it's a serious amount of money. Water holding increased, you don't have to irrigate. If we get the biology back into the soil, we don't have to rotate. Ooh. Yeah. This is it flies in the face of some of the organic regulations. But if you really understand life, you realize pretty rapidly that the reason we have to rotate crops is completely wiped out when you get the life in your soil right. We need to improve. We need to put a second track into the organic regulations. Because why do we rotate? What are the reasons? What are the purposes to do rotation? Because if you don't rotate, the diseases are going to build up. And your plants are going to get wiped out by the root-feeding nematodes, by the disease-causing fungi. So think back to what I was just talking to you about. If we cover all these surfaces with these beneficial organisms, there is no way the disease-causing fungi will even know your plant's there. There is no way that we will have a predominance of root-feeding nematodes. If we have highly beneficial aerobic conditions in our soil, so soil structure's been built, oxygen and water going down as deep as they can go, there are no diseases. There are no insect pests. So why do you have to rotate?
Well, what about depleting the nutrients?
So what about depleting the nutrients? So remember what I said is there is no soil on this planet that lacks the nutrients to grow a plant. When you look at the nutrient concentration in the sands, the silts, the clays, the rocks, and the pebbles in your soil, you have hundreds of thousands of years of nutrients stored away in the rocks, the sands, the silts, the clays, the pebbles, and rocks, until the day that you run out of sand, silt, clay, rocks, pebbles, or organic matter. There is no need to rotate a crop.
Do you need all of those? Or
Do you
have only clay?
What if you have only clay? What if you have only sand? Well, then we want to get the organic matter back in there. So, yeah, here we go. But your sand, your clay has all the mineral nutrients. You might be limited in a size fraction, but you're going to have to put organic matter back in there to build that structure. And that's what is more important. So if we do all the proper biology, we shouldn't have to rotate. Weeds do poorly if you get the right biology back into the soil, and I've got to talk to you about that fungal to bacterial biomass ratio, the protozoa to good guy nematode ratio, because that explains why weeds don't even germinate and they will not grow if you get this food web proper in your soil. Balanced nutrients, you have healthy plants, they're not susceptible to disease. Bye.